Thanks for that kind introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm Kevin Haggerty, she said. I actually typically introduce myself as a recovering juvenile corrections worker. I spent about 10 years working in a juvenile corrections facility, and that was about 30 years ago. And it became really clear to me that we could make great gains with young people who were institutionalized, and when they got out, where did they go? Home. What changed? The kid did. The school, the community, mostly the family was still pretty much the same. And it became pretty clear to me that young people who were coming out of those environments, crimes and substance use were pretty rewarding. And so they got back into that same thing. And so I started working with Dave Hawkins and Rick Catalano about 30 years ago to begin to understand what could we do to make a difference in the lives of young people to actually reduce the risk that they would end up in those places that I worked for so long. And so I began working with school and family and community programs that made a difference in the lives of young people. And one of those programs I've been working with, it's not really a program, but one of the organizing frameworks that Cindy talked about is called Communities That Care. Today, I want to do three things. First, I want to talk with you about a little bit of the progress that we've made over time. Second, I want to give you an update because Sue asked me to tell you what the latest research is with Communities That Care, so I'm going to tell you about the research. And third, I'm going to leave you with a strategy called the Social Development Strategy that can help as you're thinking about your strategic plan to really make a difference in creating healthy environments for all young people to live, learn, work, and play. So to start with, I want to focus a little bit on giving a little bit of an update on where we are in a progress report nationally. Now, I would say, it's fair to say in our current state of affairs, we live in a world of alternative facts. And I'm going to try to base my facts on science. And so I think it's really important for us to make decisions out of the best scientific facts that we can. And I want to provide you, can we go, oh, this is right. Provide you with some information around certain aspects. First, is teen pregnancy rising or falling? For who? Let's take a look. You see here that we see drops in teenage pregnancy across the board. For Black, Hispanic, white, for all populations, we see a steep decrease in teen pregnancy. That's really important because those young people who aren't in teen pregnant families have a really much better opportunity. How about school dropout rates? Are those increasing or decreasing? School dropout. Decreasing. Yeah, actually quite a bit. Let's take a look at the dropout rates amongst a whole variety of different populations. And you can see that they're dropping quite a bit. If you take a look at Hispanic, for example, 34% back in 1969, down to 10.6% in 2014. That's a large drop. So dropout rates are dropping. So what about juvenile arrest? We hear about how horrible violence is in our country. And what about violence? Is it increasing or decreasing? Decreasing. This is overall violent arrest for juveniles. You can see a steep decrease. And then I'm just going to show you some larceny theft data because it shows it by different populations. And you can see that across the board with different populations, we're seeing that same downward trend on juvenile arrest. That's good news. It's good that we're seeing drops in teen pregnancy, drops in dropout, drops in drug abuse. Oh, I already gave my next one away, didn't I? What about people graduating from more likely to be drug-free? Well, look at this. This to me is really interesting. What you see here is that if you look at the bottom line, that's 12th graders. And it's the proportion of 12th graders who report being substance-free in the past 30 days from 1976 to 2014. Now, if you look at that, that's a doubling of young people, doesn't come up, a doubling of young people from in that time frame who are drug-free. More young people are graduating from high school drug-free now than they were when I graduated from high school back in 1976. And we see a corresponding decrease in substance use. Alcohol, tobacco, even vaping. If you see the green line there, you see a decrease. Where don't we see a decrease? Marijuana. And that's, of course, for me, coming from Washington State, a bit of a concern, because as you probably all know, we're in this great experiment where we've legalized marijuana, and we don't see that corresponding decrease. That's something we have to follow over time. Good news in a lot of these areas. 30 years ago, we didn't have the knowledge base that we have now on what we can do to prevent problem behavior. Let's just think about this. Here's your prevention quiz. Before 1980, out of 9 delinquency prevention trials, how many were effective, actually impacted delinquency? Anyone want to guess? Oh, none. None had the desired effect. Now think about 14 drug abuse prevention trials that were done before 1980. How did we do with those, do you think? Not very well, largely ineffective. In fact, one of the things we found is some of the programs actually increased use. Kids would go, oh, wow, you can get high off of Valium. My mom's got some of that in the medicine cabinet. I know where to find it. And so information-only programs were largely ineffective at reducing substance use. What's changed? What's changed is we now know the underlying factors on what puts young people at risk. We can move upstream, make a difference. That's what you heard Nan talking about, having the capacity to make the difference early on in the lives of young people so that we can have a more protected environment for people to grow. And so we use a much more public health approach where we define the problem, identifying those underlying risk factors, really use tested effective interventions to make a difference and evaluate whether we're getting there. And now we know that there are certain risk factors that increase the likelihood that young people will be involved in substance abuse, delinquency, teen violence, high school dropout, depression and anxiety. All of those, when you see a check in one of these boxes, you see that there's at least 2 well-designed longitudinal studies showing that factor predicts the problem behavior. So for example, you see availability of drugs has a check in that box under substance abuse and violence. Availability of drugs has been demonstrated to predict that outcome for those problem behaviors. So when you look, for example, you see here community risk factors. There's community, family, school, and individual peer. When you see family risk factors, you see family history of problem behavior having an impact on all of those problem behaviors. Or family management problems. 3 really important components of family management. GMC, clear guidelines, how well are you monitoring what's going on in the family, and whether the consequences are clear and consistent, GMC. When those are unclear, when there's not clear guidelines, when you're not doing good monitoring, increased risk, more likely, all across the board, higher rates of substance abuse, delinquency, teen pregnancy, school dropout, violence, and depression and anxiety. If we move upstream, deal with these underlying conditions, we have better outcomes. We see school risk factors, and we see individual and peer factors. I'm not going to go into detail on these because we don't have a lot of time, but there's a lot of information around these underlying factors and how we can be strategic in your strategic plan at addressing those using the best evidence possible. And we also have organized protective factors, those things that protect or buffer young people and create healthy environments for young people to live. And we do that in what we call the social development model. I'm going to be talking more about the social development model. I'm going to tell you that there's 5 really important components, and we're going to come back and visit those. Opportunities for meaningful involvement for young people. Skills to be successfully involved. Rewards, recognition, acknowledgement for that involvement. That creates that strong bond. And when you're bonded or connected, you're more likely to follow the healthy beliefs and clear standards of the community, school that you're in. So we're going to come back and talk about the application of that to your strategic plan. Now, we all know that the data I just showed you are national data, and that communities are all different. And Broward County is definitely different than where I live in Seattle. So we know that we have to have a local approach at addressing risk factors because communities have different norms and values. We have different youth with different types of problems. We know that there are different levels of risk and protection in your communities that may be different here than they are even in counties north or south of you. And there are different resources, and we heard Nan talk about that, and capacities depending on what community you live in. So we need a community-focused approach to effectively address those underlying factors to make a difference. How do we do that? We use what we call communities that care. And this is a second important thing I want to talk to you about. Communities that care features the social development model as a framework for creating protection. The social development strategy or the social development model is at the very heart of communities that care. It's data-driven. It uses, it's community-owned and operated first and foremost, and the community makes decisions. It's data-driven, using community data and voices of youth around what's currently happening in your own community. And it's evidence-based. It's using the best programs, the best evidence to get the impact and the outcomes that you want for your community. And it's outcome-focused. It never takes the eyes off the prize, keeps the focus on what's the outcome we're trying to achieve. And what's really unique and important about communities that care is it's been tested and found to be effective. And that's going to come up there. And really what communities that care is it's kind of a common language. It provides a common language, and Cindy talked about how we're all rowing in the same direction. That's what communities that care does. It provides that common language. And this little video gives kind of that reason for why we need to have a common language. Let's take a look at it.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Gerät. Überlebensradar.
Mayday, Mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
We need to have a common language if we're going to move through this thing together, and that's what Cindy was talking about. We got to all be moving in the same direction. And Communities That Care does that in 5 phases. And we heard both Nan and Cindy talk earlier about how back in 1999 they started by getting people together and saying, let's move in this direction, let's start doing that. And that's in that getting started area. If the mayor, the police chief, the school superintendent don't come together and can't get in the same car and drive to a meeting without arguing, probably not prepared to do this part. But Communities that care in the getting organized phase is really getting together saying, yeah, we need to do something and make a difference for young people. The next phase, get organized, brings people together to really understand prevention science, the focus on risk and protection, and how the community can become more aware of what their data are telling them. The third piece is creating a profile of risk and protection. And we use data in the Community Use Care Survey that provides not only outcomes like the YRBS that you use here, but also really important measures on those underlying factors, those risk and protective factors, so that you can make priorities based on your community's own levels of risk and protection. The other thing that happens during this phase is you take a look at what else is happening in the community and where are the gaps and how can you address those gaps by providing the best tested and effective programs that we know work. The fourth phase is creating that plan, using your resources and identifying what will work best for your community. And then the fifth phase is so important, and that's part of where you all are now, which is how we've been doing. Let's evaluate what's going on, and then notice it goes in a circle and you start all over again. But you don't have to start necessarily at get organized, because you already have really organized folks here. You might just jump to phase 2 or phase 3 again to take a look at where things are. So that kind of gives an overview of communities that care. If that is that enough for you for me to move on? You got kind of a picture of it? Okay, great. I said that we use real voices, that the survey is an important tool for young people to give their input about what's happening, and that communities come together to select the best evidence-based programs. And we use Blueprints for Healthy Youth Development. How many of you know Blueprints for Healthy Youth Development, that website? Okay, if there's anything else you take away from here today, take this. This is not part of Communities That Care. This is from the University of Boulder. This is the best rating of those programs that actually address and have been tested to address the underlying risk and protective factors. This is an important tool, whether you use Communities That Care or not. This is independent of Communities That Care. Really important for you to know about Blueprints for Healthy Youth Development. They evaluate the programs that are intended to make a difference and look at how well they actually do. And you can see an example here of when communities use a variety of different programs. Life skills training, for example. When that's installed in middle schools in a district, it impacts drug use, delinquency, violence, risky sex, and risky driving. So by addressing those underlying predictors, you're impacting a whole host of problem behaviors for young people. And you can just see other examples there as well. Now, it takes a while to get there. You have to have that vision. You get started and move along. It takes about a year to go through that process before you get to implementing your programs. And we started in 2002 doing a randomized controlled trial of Communities That Care in 7 states and 24 communities across the nation. This cost about $40 million, and we have followed a longitudinal panel of young people, about 4,400 of them, across time to look at the impact of whether kids growing up in those communities that were using Communities That Care were different than those who were randomly assigned to communities that weren't in Communities That Care. And you get to hear today, first, some early data on outcomes. I'm going to just show you, we started seeing early on in grade 7 impacts on risk and protective factors. In grades 8, 10, and 12, and even at age 19, we saw differences in the initiation of substance use and delinquency. And right here, you get to see that actually at age 21, these continued to be sustained. so that young people growing up in communities, even if they left that community, those young people had lower rates of delinquency, violence, and gateway drug use than in the non-CTC communities. This is important because it demonstrates that communities have a long-lasting impact on the lives of young people, exactly what you're trying to do here in Broward County. Let me give this to you another way. In communities that care communities, at 8th grade, we saw a 33% reduction in tobacco initiation, 32% reduction in alcohol initiation, and 25% reduction in delinquency. At age 21, see 18% had never used gateway drugs in CTC communities, compared to 12% of controls. 38% had never engaged in delinquency, compared to 29% of controls, and 62% had never engaged in violence. That's pretty significant. If you think about that kind of level of impact, say with Pepsi or Coke, your stock market would drop tremendously based on data like that. Those are big changes. And for every dollar invested in the community, there's a $4.17 benefit over time. These are independent cost-benefit analyses done by Washington State Institute for Public Policy. So it makes a difference, it's cost-effective, and we address those underlying factors that really impact young people. Now, I'm going to zip through this because CTC is now available in a web-based platform called CTC Plus, and we provided both the web-based platform for communities along with technical assistance and coaching. But what I really want to talk about is the social development strategy. Why? Because this is where the rubber meets the road. Now, I was a park commissioner, an elected park commissioner at a park in my community. And one of the things that happened is the park bordered on a housing development. And our park director came out one time and said, we gotta block off this housing development, we gotta put the fence up, we gotta lock kids out, we need to call the police. These kids are coming in here and they're disturbing the other kids in the park. We can't have these kids coming in this park doing that. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, we gotta, if we could lock that fence, that gate, that'd be really good, and we just gotta. I said, absolutely not. Those kids are exactly the ones we need to be pulling toward us, not pushing away. We don't lock those kids out of anything. She said, what are you saying? I said, find out what they want and pull them in, because we're not locking kids out of this park. It's their park too. She said, what? I said, yeah. Fortunately, I was a commissioner and she was the director, so I could do that. And so she said, what do you want me to do? I said, talk to him. And she said, okay. And I remember her walking out and going, okay, pizza, tomorrow, here, 5 o'clock. Come if you want some. And the kids showed up, some of them in that picture there. And what they wanted is they wanted a park where they felt like they could do things. And they wanted actually to learn games and have fun. And so she shifted the way she was looking at these young people. Instead of looking at them as a problem, she started seeing them as a resource and as an opportunity to really promote more games and more fun in the park. And so she started a kickball tournament with these kids because that's one of the things they wanted, and the commissioners and the kids had a kickball tournament with each other, and that was really kind of a cool thing. We did something that you called the social development strategy. And that's those 5 things. We need to make sure young people have important opportunities for meaningful involvement. Those young people in the park gave us input. They wanted to learn skills. They wanted to learn things like kickball and have organized games because they hadn't been in a lot of the organized sports. Many of their families couldn't afford that. Then it needed to be recognized, reinforced, acknowledged, celebrated. That's that 3rd piece, recognition. Opportunity, skills, recognition. That promotes bonding, that thing that glues us together. When young people are bonded together, they're more likely to follow that 5th thing, healthy beliefs and clear standards. Those 5 issues. That is the heart of the strategy that communities work to do. So you're probably thinking, well, what's the evidence? How do we know this is effective? Well, look at this next slide, and you tell me if the blue lines are higher or the red lines. Let's see. Blue lines higher or red lines? Blue lines. Blue lines are the communities that care communities. The red lines are the control communities. And this is 3 years after communities that care. So what we see is this significant increase in creating more protected communities. We know that we need to provide opportunities that are based on people's individual characteristics. It's an important component of the model. We have to consider individual characteristics. They need to be meaningful and age appropriate, fit the young person's interest, and show that young people are valued as resources in the community. We want to teach skills that take advantage of those opportunities and help them use those opportunities and break the skills into small steps that are meaningful and doable for young people. And then there's the recognition and rewards. This is one of my favorite things. In Tooele City, they have the mayor's recognition every month. They pack out the chambers in the city council because they find young people to reward. They have a recognition ceremony, and the community comes together. And what that's done for the council is made the council one of the most fun meetings for the city council members because they see themselves doing a real service for young people in the community. And then this is one from Freeport, Illinois, where they were doing the Lions Quest work, and Quiznos partnered up with them to do the Quiznos Kid of the Week. Actually, it's the Quiznos Quest Kid of the Week. That's hard to say. And so they recognized young people for their involvement, opportunities, skills, recognition. What's the next thing? Those three things lead to bonding, really important element. And then it's really making sure that you have the healthy beliefs and clear standards recognized. This is from my community where we had serious issues with underage drinking. And we need to really reinforce at home, at school, with consistent community norms. At school, is it, the high school star athletes who are getting out of the consequences? Is that an issue? In some communities it is. So how are they consistently enforced across the community? So I've just given you the social development strategy. Just talk to the people around you. Real quick, what are the 5 elements? See if you can get them. Talk at your tables for just 30 seconds around what are the 5 elements of the social development strategy. This is your quiz. What's the first thing? Opportunities. What comes next? Skills. Third thing? Recognition. Remember, there's John Gottman does this whole thing on 5 to 1. 5 meaningful, supportive interactions to every negative interaction. And then that's kind of the magic ratio. They don't need to be 5 recognition, but positive interactions to every negative interaction. If you have opportunities, skills, and recognition, what are you promoting? Bonding. And when you have bonding, what's that more likely to do? Help you follow healthy beliefs and clear standards, making sure you have those clear standards. And we have to pay attention to what? Individual characteristics. We have to really think about the individual characteristics. Those 5 things, there's 3 things that I'm hoping you'll take away. 1, you might have a youth in your neighborhood, your school, your community, where you can really think about how am I providing opportunity skills recognition. 2, think about how you might teach someone else opportunity skills recognition, the social development strategy. 3, as you step out and are thinking about your strategic plan for Broward County, how does the social development strategy and building healthier environments fit into that? Those are the 3 things I'm leaving you with as your action from this morning's breakfast. So take those 3, and I hope you have a wonderful day working together. I'd be remiss without acknowledging the funders of the Communities That Care study, and particularly the National Institute on Drug Abuse. So thank you so much for your time. I hope you take the social development strategy and really integrate it into the work you're doing here. Thank you very much.